Introduction. How is everyone doing? I believe I'm the last speaker before the panel. And some of you may be feeling a little bit jet lagged like I am. So feel free to stretch as I get started with my talk. So thank you for having me. This is really wonderful. I think I'm really lucky here because I can kind of leverage on some of the topics that's been explored already. So that's a big bonus for me. My talk is titled Prioritizing Everyday Responsible Robotics. And I'm emphasizing here the everyday aspect of it. And maybe the way I'll frame this talk is really that I'm going to tell you a little bit about a story of my exploration in the field of human-robot interaction and robot ethics, because I kind of stumbled into these domains by accidentally, and tell you a bit about where my journey seems to be with respect to my academic endeavors in this topic. So I run a small lab called the Raise Lab. Rahat is one of my PhD students. He's in the audience here. Maybe some other students are tuning in. I come from mechatronics engineering background, and in my first semester of my undergraduate degree at University of Waterloo, I realized all of the peers around me are super smart and they're really excited about technology. And somehow I'm excited about technologies too, but I'm also excited about these other things that I would like to explore. And that was really around the time where I was really fascinated about some of the newspaper articles that were coming out. The photo you see on the slide in front of you is a Sentry robot that was developed by a Samsung subsidiary company called TechWin. I believe it is Hanwha TechWin now, but anyways, this was over a decade ago, and they were demonstrating how these remote piloted or remote kind of systems could sense and monitor the demilitarized zone between the South and North Korea. And this is a border, you know, that's been contested, that's been monitored on both sides of the two Koreas for many years, 24/7, nonstop, and human monitored. And back then, there was this idea that, oh, what if we could roboticize this particular area and surveillance? Wouldn't that be great? We can save on labor, and people won't be so bored walking around this area all the time. Anyway, so my interest in robot ethics topics kind of came from articles like this. And I realized, you know, as a mechatronics engineering student, I was being taught how to put sensors, actuators, some processing connections in between, and voila, you've got a robot. Isn't that cool? That's what I was being taught, and I thought, yes, that is cool. I agree with you. But I can also imagine how I could come up with really dangerous systems that could kill people automatically. And it doesn't even have to be very sophisticated. I just know how to connect these things together and do something really dangerous. And no one was actually preventing me from building these systems, because we didn't have explicit guidelines to say, oh, let's not build these things. That doesn't sound like a good idea. So that got me into this field of robot ethics and eventually human-robot interaction. This is a big digression to say that my introduction to the field of roboethics was in part reading Peter Asaro's papers, but also the thoughts about life or death situations where a robot would potentially come in and intelligent systems will make these human life or death decisions for us, and isn't that really scary? And I thought that was really what the field was about. And around 2014, 2015 is when we started to see a lot of discussions about autonomous cars. And that became like the centerpiece for talking about robot ethics. And this is one of the many dilemma scenarios that were discussed in the domain. This one is done by Jason Miller, a professor at University of Waterloo, called the, not Waterloo, University of Ottawa, called the tunnel problem. There's many variations of this, as I mentioned before. But imagine a self-driving car is going down a single-lane road towards a tunnel, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's a little kid going across the street, and your car is too fast. You're a passenger. You're the lone passenger in this car. You cannot stop. It's either the car hits the kid, and the kid dies, or the car veers off and kills you. All right. So the questions were, okay, what would be the right answer? How should we program robots to respond to these situations? And shouldn't that be the most important thing for us to discuss? Back then, I had started a small nonprofit called the Open Robotics Institute, where we actually ran some public polls, asking people what they thought about these kind of issues and why. Why would you choose to kill a child instead of you? And some people would say, well, because I bought the car, so it should prioritize my life, right? So that was all fun. But what I've realized over the past few years is that, yes, dilemma scenarios are really interesting, and it gets a lot of attention, and I think it is important for us to have policy and ethics discussions. But in fact, the discussions about life and death situations and making these machines to make the decisions for us, it's actually a little abstract. It's hard for us as designers to think about an everyday kind of a situation where, yes, I am putting my ethics moral person hat on to design a system that everybody will use and benefit from. Because I'm not an ER doctor. I don't make life or death decisions every day, and I don't see that particular role being replaced by a robot anytime soon. So, at the Raise Up, this is one of the recent photos of my group here. We study, our efforts are really trying to look at this discussions about human values and ethics and bring it to the levels of design thinking that we can actually do something about. As engineers, can we actually make ethical decisions that impact people's lives? Can we actually talk about some policies that really should be looked at today rather than futuristic, sentient machines that may or may not kill us? One part of my portfolio is also looking at AI ethics. I won't be talking about that today, but we'll be talking a little bit more about the everyday responsible robotics kind of projects. So what do I mean by everyday responsible robotics? Well, so obviously I'm not talking about life or death decisions and making that decision every day, but what I mean by it is really everyday responsible robotics should be about things that are daily situations where you can envision some sort of moral tension being at play, where you can encounter that kind of situation in a daily kind of frequent kind of situations or frequent basis. It should also reflect some realities about the world today. What are some of the policies or legal regulatory frameworks that are in place already that is preventing us from making the quote-unquote right or ethical decisions? And what are some of the factors in the world that are already impacting some of the design and deployment decisions? This is also a little bit abstract, so what I'm going to do in this talk is to talk to you about 3 different kinds of quote-unquote everyday responsible robotics issues, I think, that are really interesting and deserves our attention. And I'm going to walk you through the design component of it, or parts that involve our design thinking hat on. Parts that require us to think a little more carefully about the way we design or deploy our robotic systems, and also those that require us to rethink governance more broadly before we deploy these systems. Okay, so let me jump straight to the design section. Going back to a few years ago as well, what you see in front of you are some of the books that were published within the last 15 years or so, I want to say. These were books that really inspired me to really think about these robots that could be good, that could make the right decisions for us. More Machines was one of the books that really talked about, okay, could we possibly have a top-down kind of a system where, we have some ethical principles and we codify it and then we implement it into these systems, and maybe we'll have good, good quote-unquote good systems? Or would it be better for us to approach it from bottom up, where we learn from examples of people, or maybe a hybrid in between? And then Governing Lethal Behavior in Autonomous Robots by Ron Arkin, he was really contemplating the idea that, you know, killer robots could actually be good for the world. And here's how you would actually architect such a software, because these systems may be able to make, quote unquote, better decisions than humans. And some of the things that were really, really frustrating about this literature, though, is we haven't really seen a lot of progress behind the prototyping, conceptual thinking, and designing of these software architectures to implementing it and demonstrating it. Maybe it's a good thing that we haven't demonstrated in the warfare, you know, like, oh, robots make more ethical warfare. Maybe that's not something we want to empirically test. However, even in the toy situations, I don't see enough of examples of moral machines that make better decisions than humans. And I think part of, one hypothesis I came up with my former postdoc, Jimin Rim, is the fact that maybe our gold kind of standard that we're aiming for, this idea of a generally ethical robot, maybe that's not something we want to go for because it's too abstract. Maybe what needs to happen is bring down this general perfect robot and focus on a very specific situation and approach it as a design problem. And maybe that will allow us to go a little bit closer to robots that are designed to be ethical or that are able to make quote-unquote ethical decisions based on certain people's standards. So here's an example of such a scenario. Imagine you have an apartment and you have a group of family members who live in there or visit the home, and you have a robot that can fetch items. The only thing it can do is take fetching requests and deliver that robot, that object to whoever or wherever it's supposed to go. Daily life situations, I would say, right? If I say, Mom, can you get me that bottle of water because I'm too lazy, right? And Mom doesn't do it, there's a robot to do it, you know. That kind of daily life situations. It's not really daily. I don't ask Mom for that. Anyways, you can envision this is not a life or death situation, but as you can see from some of the scenarios, there are some really interesting ethical contentions we should be thinking about. For example, scenario one. Imagine the daughter, Amy, is a teenager, and she requests her diary, which is a personal item, to be given to her mother, Jill. Okay. Somehow, I, the owner of this private information, is providing this very private item to the person. Okay. Should the robot deliver that item? Yay or nay? Is this a particularly hard question? Probably no problem, right? Maybe that's okay. I don't know. What about the second scenario? Amy asks a knife to be brought to her baby brother, Ben. Oh, a little tricky. Safety concerns, maybe not. Red alert going on. What about some variations of this, right? So let's say it's not Amy who's requesting her diary, but maybe Mom is saying, hey, robot, get me Amy's diary. What has she written recently? What's going on with her? Okay. Should the robot bring the diary to the mom? What about this other example? The boyfriend comes to visit once in a while, and then as a visitor, he says, robot, can you get Amy's mom's credit card? Yeah. Or nobody's at home, and Amy is underage, and then she says, hey, robot, get me some of that alcohol. That's in the stash that I'm not allowed to touch. Okay. I would say these are some of the near future scenarios where we can actually envision that if it were to be a human who is taking these fetch requests, we would get the human to somehow make this utilitarian or other kind of calculus, make some moral thinking happen, and make some appropriate decisions so that we have trust in this human to make the right decisions. But for a robot, for us to design a robot to make quote-unquote these decisions, we have to explicitly program that in. So what we've done to test our hypothesis is to put that as a scenario for a roboethics themed competition. So we've done it 2 years in a row, once at Roma, which was a virtual conference back in 2021, and once this summer at ICRA 2022. And across the two competitions, we were able to get I believe, 7 different submissions in total from people who proposed different kind of ideas in terms of how we should be architecting the software behind this kind of scenario, how we should be thinking about the appropriateness of these requests. This was the winning team from the University of Toronto at Roma 2021. For them, they thought, well, okay, so in this scenario, mom is the owner of this robot, so maybe we can model mom as the model. Maybe the robot should be programmed as an extension of mom, the owner, and then do what she would do, and we would actually implement that in. And they implemented it in the sense of what are some of the eligible requests with respect to the items, and then who can actually be recipients of that in the safety terms and whatnot. This was really interesting for us because what this allowed us to do, and this was one of the many that were implemented as technical systems, we were able to actually analyze what would happen with this particular programming solution if, using this architecture, we decided different combinations of items and requesters and receivers, because the different combinations can lead to different kind of results. What's much more interesting for us going forward is this kind of daily life situations are very, very hard for us to benchmark. One of the trickiest challenges for roboethics, I think, or building moral machines, more broadly speaking, has been that we don't have the right answers. We don't even agree across cultures what is the universally right answers, the most moral answers to any kind of dilemmas. Therefore, we're not even gonna design anything. We can get away from that kind of thinking because now we can have specific kind of benchmarks for specific groups of stakeholders and say, well, you know, maybe at Neighbor Labs, the Koreans would like the systems to operate in these kind of manners, because that's much more culturally suitable, and we're happy with that. Maybe we would localize it differently in other cultures, and maybe we can benchmark that differently in the future as well. So this is a call for you to come and talk to me if you're interested in using this kind of design competitions as a benchmarking or research tool, because we're gonna run it again in 2023 at ICRA. But this particular work is, I believe, an example of how, as designers, we can start to think about everyday ethics challenges and start to program that in as a technical challenge, because now we can think about it as design specifications. But let me tell you one of the recent studies that we've conducted that gets us to think about deployment a little bit. So back in 2011 at CHI, Lee and Takayama published a really interesting paper called "Now I Have a Body," and this paper was really, and this is the figure that we've taken from that paper there. This was a really interesting paper that was looking at the rise of telepresence robots. So I've got a photo of an Omni robot, which is an example there, which is, you know, we've got a screen and a mobile base and a stick in between. And the idea is you can, quote unquote, zoom into these systems, remote operate these systems so that you can have a body and navigate around the room and socially interact with others who are in this remote location. So in this telepresence or MRP systems world, we call the person who is tuning into these systems as remote pilot, because you're remote and piloting the system. And then you interface or interact with the local users who are co-located with the physical robot. In the Lee and Takayama paper, what was really interesting was they described a series of interactions that they've observed where people, the local users of the robot, would actually do things that offend the remote pilots, such as changing the volume knob of the microphone or the speaker of the robot, And that would really offend the remote pilot, as though somebody's actually, touching your bellies or something like that, or explicitly telling you to shut up, so to speak, right? And that got us to really think about this question of expected norms. Maybe when we mediate our social interactions with each other using things like the telepresence robot, perhaps what we haven't paid enough attention to is the fact that the pilots may have a social norm expectation that may not match with what the local user thinks is socially normal. And so we put that to a test. We thought, well, one of the social norms that we can test is this more or less universal kind of a politeness norm called first come, first served. Okay. So be it in an elevator scenarios or cafeterias or whatnot, if you're in a lineup kind of situation or a limited space resource context, then you kind of expect that whoever is first in line should be served first. So the question was this: if we have a telepresence robot and an elevator, and then there's another person who may be using the elevator, waiting for the elevator, and there's limited location, would the remote pilot, as well as a local user, expect to treat each other with the same first come, first serve norm? So we had a couple of factors that we wanted to design, and of course, because of COVID, we were doing this in a virtual simulated study. But we had a few different scenarios that we wanted to look at. So imagine there is an elevator, and then in one scenario, there's a local user who's waiting for the elevator. The elevator opens, and by the time the elevator is opened, there is a telepresence robot that arrived. Okay. And then one outcome is, okay, the first person who arrived, in this case the local user, enters first. Or it could be that the telepresence robot cuts the line and then enters the elevator first. Or it could be the reverse way. And so you can envision that if it's the local user who was there first, then first come, first serve, it's obvious the local user gets the right away. If it's not the other way, then the MRP enters first and the norm is violated. If the telepresence robot was there in the first place, then obviously it's the flip side. You would expect, if you expect the first come, first serve norm to hold, then you should let the telepresence robot to go first as well. We've tested this kind of scenario. We showed different renditions of these 3D renderings of the scenarios to 900 online participants, and this is a paper that is in review at HRI. Sorry for deblinding some of you, maybe. Anyway, so we provided two different perspectives. So we assigned half of our participants to be the local users. So they looked at the videos as though they are the humans in the room watching a telepresence robot approach. And the other half were actually pretending to be the remote users using this telepresence robot. And the results were quite fascinating. What we found is when we ask people about the social appropriateness of somebody jumping the queue, we found that the local users, well, we find that the remote pilots perceive it to be even less acceptable when they were jumping the queue. Does that make sense? So somehow, the remote pilots have this perception of themselves as having a lower hierarchy. Much more fascinating to me, though, is this. We asked people who were in the local user category whether they think these telepresence robots should be treated as an extension of the pilot or not. And we kind of analyze our data in two different ways based on their answers. What you see as a crisscross with the pink blobs on the graph is essentially saying that for people who believe that telepresence robots are not an extension of people, they thought this telepresence robot should not get the right of way. I should get the right of way, regardless of whether I came first or not. On the other hand, if you, the local user, believe that, yeah, this is an extension of a person, they actually expect first come first to be respected. What does that mean for us? I mean, this has nothing to do with design, in my view. I think it has a lot more to do with the sense of deployment, because in a way, we need to educate the people who may be the incidental co-present persons with respect to telepresence robots, and let them know that actually there are people using these robots. Don't hang your coat because you think it's a convenient place to hang your coat, because it's not a furniture. The person who's operating it might actually feel offended. Treat this robot as though it's an extension of a person. Maybe you'll disagree with me, and that's okay. But I think the problem here is that this kind of systems are out in the world today. And every time, and I think I was telling some of you today, every time I see telepresence robots at conferences, I see them being ignored. And I also have ignored people who are telepresent using these robots as well, because I somehow feel awkward about talking to them. Somehow I feel like it's a different kind of interaction than if I were to talk to a stranger who is in person and in line for coffee with me. So there are parts about the design that also needs to be figured out, but I think if we were to educate ourselves as secondary users of these telepresence robots and acknowledge that we should be treating these people as people rather than secondary citizens, then maybe the beneficiaries of these people, of these systems, which include vulnerable populations, children who are immune compromised and therefore cannot attend school in person, these users would feel much more engaged and treated like equals if we were to deploy them in that sense. Okay, I hope I'm not talking too fast. We're going over time. But I'll quickly go into the governance topic and then wrap up as well. So governance is a really interesting topic, and this is quite new to me. I used to love using these kind of polls. This was one of the polls that I helped conduct back when I was running the Open Robotics Institute. Maybe I'll walk through the scenario with you. So think about Emma, who is an alcoholic, and she requests a robot to bring her some alcoholic drink against the doctor's orders. And the question that we posed to our online participants was, should the robot still bring her the drink? And fascinatingly enough, when we pose a scenario as though Emma is the owner of the robot, the majority of people said, yeah, get her whatever she wants. Well, at least 44% of the times people said always, and majority of the times, at least sometimes, get her the drink. When the scenario was presented such that she's not the owner, but somebody else owns the robot, then the majority said never get her the drink. And we repeated this kind of scenario with Jack the obese. He's not allowed to have junk foods, just to have variety, just to see if there's consistency. And we had crazy levels of consistency from the same participants here. And we're looking at about 325 participants here. And to the same group of people, we asked, should ownership influence the decision-making of a care robot? And you see the tiny pie chart up top there, which is people are kind of torn. We're 50-50. We don't know whether ownership should really matter in the way the robot should be designed. And I thought this was really, really cool, interesting information, because when we design these kind of systems and when we envision human-robot interaction or conduct controlled human-robot interaction studies, we don't often have the idea of ownership and how ownership and liability should sometimes play a role here. And often, I think our assumptions about ownership look something like this. We think in the world of selling of robots and consumer robotics, at least in my view, at the time of posing the poll, I thought there are people who made stuff, who own the stuff up until they sold the stuff. And then when they've sold the stuff, I thought the people who bought the stuff become the owners of the stuff. And by that, I thought it included things like the person who bought the stuff should have the right to continue to have the ownership. This person should have the right to resell the robot or be able to repair it if it gets broken or modified in whatever ways. What I found out more recently, because of a very fun book chapter that I ended up writing with, again, Jimin, is in the field of Internet of Things, there has been a few issues of precarious, what Tsuchikov calls precarious ownership. What this means is that because of the end-user license agreements being so central to the way we deploy software, when it comes to IoT devices like the Revolve Hub that is photoed here, people buy the hardware thinking they're going to get the full service, such as, I'm going to have this hub that can connect to all the IoT devices, and I'm going to have it forever, and it's going to work forever. All of a sudden, the company could be bought by Nest in this particular case. Nest can decide to unplug the server, and the next day, nobody has any service. This piece of hardware that you have bought does not actually function for you anymore. It's bricked. I have had a first-hand encounter with that in the robotics side of things. This is Jibo. Some of you may know this robot very intimately. It was one of the more affordable robots that came out in the early 2017, something like that. I scraped my grad school savings monies to get myself a robot. And by the time it arrived, it was only a few months until Jibo went under, bought by another company, and the server was disconnected. What happened really was the Jibo community, I think there were thousands of these robots that were sold. There were many people who started to actually like the robot, had this kind of emotional connections and whatnot that Cynthia Brazil and the makers of Jibo really wanted to create. But it was a very sudden, quote-unquote, death. And the hardware had nothing to do with it in terms of its malfunctioning or decline of functioning. It was only that none of us who have purchased the robot had the right to the software, because software belongs to Jibo, the company. And if they unplug the server and now it doesn't do anything, well, you keep the hardware. And I thought that was really unfair, because for the last handful of years, I could not make use of Jibo at all, although the hardware was fine. Now it's coming back. There's a backstory. I can tell you a little bit more later on. But more important is that this regulatory structure that we have about the way we sell software, the way we sell consumer robots, is increasingly becoming more subscription-based. I think it's in part to observe the cost of the cloud computing services that you need to run the machine learning systems and update the software and whatnot. But this actually poses many different issues. So these are some of the examples of subscription-based systems. But there are at least 7 problems that we were able to think about as we envisioned the world of lots of social robots in the world, which is that, if we had a lot of Rosies that could help grandma pick up things off the floor or grab items that becomes part of the task of daily living, and everything is subscription-based, maybe Tesla owns it, I don't know. Maybe Tesla decided, the stock market is not good. We're going to up the subscription fees to $500 the next month. Or, the more lucrative would be a new privacy terms and conditions. And if you opt out of that, then, well, sorry, we're not going to do business with you. The many thousands of dollars you may have invested in the hardware of the robot may become a very expensive piece of decoration. What does that mean for us as people in human-robot interaction wanting to bring more of these robots into the world? Well, I think I won't go into the details of all 7 of these issues, but I think we're looking at a world where people with financial means would probably be able to purchase better quality human-robot interaction than people who opt in for free services who may be subjected to more ads. based on some of the projections, based on the tech market today. I think we'll also see some economic implications of building these robots that are not as replaceable and easy to dispose of as smartphone apps, because we can't just go to the robot, hit uninstall, and have the physical thing disappear. That's not how robots work. Which means we are looking at a very unsustainable form of consumer robotics market. Because think about all the e-waste that would be generated just because we are developing software that is specific to the particular consumer robot by this particular company. And it's typically startups, typically exploratory work, and it may work for 2 years, and that's it. And there will be thousands of them. Lastly, I think something that is really important for us to think about in terms of governance is there is no regulatory requirement that requires each of the consumer robots, or any robots in the world, to have a minimum guaranteed functionality. What does that mean? We do not have the sense that when you buy a Jibo, it should still be able to recognize you regardless of whether there is a server in the back end or not. There is no guarantee that it should have voice recognition that is functional on board. It does not have any sort of minimum guarantee. Therefore, when everything is unplugged, there is no software, there was no guarantee anyways. I hope this gives you a little bit of an overview of what I might call everyday responsible robotics. Those that do not really talk about life and death situations, but nevertheless, these are issues that are much more near future or even present day situations, because we already have a lot of e-waste based on consumer robots that have failed, that could have been repurposed and reused because, you know, open source is a thing. And we also need to be able to have the discussions about how governance can prevent these kind of situations from exacerbating the software and licensing market. Anyways, I will leave it there. Hopefully you're excited to think about these everyday responsible robotics. I'm open to collaborations as well and very excited about this conversation. So here are my team of the competition team as well as sponsors. Thank you.